Is there ever a time when common sense outweighs a Bible principle? Now, before you jump to the conclusion that you know the answer, I'm going to share a specific situation. And while I'm not trying to stir up controversy, it's sure to draw strong reactions. We need to recognize in the days ahead, more and more frequently, we will run into situations where what seems to be common sense, wisdom, even the smart thing to do, will be in direct conflict with one of God's principles. And we will have to choose which route we're going to take, which path we will take. In this particular situation, I've actually run into, over the years, so many times I can't count. And towards the end, I will share the general response. But specifically, last week, my friend Wilma called. Now, in the course of the conversation, she brought up this question. Randy, the world is getting, fill in the blank, weirder, out of control, lost, away from God. There's so many ways we can describe that. You get the idea. And the question went on, should I pull my investments out of the stock market? Now, let's note two things. First off, I normally don't use people's names. I try to keep these conversations confidential, but Wilma specifically gave me permission to use her name. And I no longer manage investments for other people. But I'll share in a moment my response. But initially, this sounds like a smart question. A couple of reasons. First off, everything we see around us, social media, all these supposed experts on YouTube, etc., they all act like they have the answer and everything's going to get worse. And even the Bible says that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. So how should we respond? Well, I shared with Wilma a couple of things. First off, Wilma, I can't tell you what the stock market is going to do tomorrow. But I know that the Bible says this, and it's a profound but hard truth. Jesus told the parable of the master going away, and he entrusted to his servants talents in proportion to their ability to handle them, manage them. And their responsibility was to manage and multiply what he had put into their custody. And it's the same for us, that our role is to manage and multiply everything God has put into our custody. Wealth, abilities, everything. But then the master returns. And what happens? The first servants have multiplied what they were put in charge of. And so they are commended as well as promoted. They're put in charge of more. But what's interesting is the last servant and how he responded. See, he was concerned about losing what he recognized belonged to the master, not to him. So in his effort to protect it, he buried it into the ground. And the hard truth that Jesus gave us was that that servant was actually rebuked, and what he had was taken away from him and given to another. The principle of faithfulness very specifically tells us that as we are faithful with everything God has put into our life, as we are faithful, then God gives us more. He brings promotion. But specifically, there is this hard truth where Jesus actually said, and he who has more will be given. And he who does not have, even what he has, will be taken away. Now, I recognize that sounds very harsh, but we can't just take the parts we like. We need to recognize the wisdom God has given us. So I shared with Wilma, I can't tell you what the stock market is going to do tomorrow. And we know, based on when the disciples went to Jesus and asked for the signs of the times, it's going to get weirder. We can't even imagine how challenging it's going to be. But he also told us that he who endures to the end will be saved. But ultimately, my principle, my commitment is that I'm going to put my trust in God through his principles rather than what seems to be common sense, what seems to be the smart thing to do. Now, Wilma chose that she agreed. She recognized that, you know what, you're right, that principle applies. But what I've seen so frequently over the years is almost exclusively people have been swayed, especially in their emotions, by a supposed expert that the next crash, whatever it may be. And I've rarely seen that work out. But what about the fact that the Bible does says that everything that can be shaken will be shaken? You know, the ultimate point of that shaking is to test where our confidence is, where our hope is. Is our confidence and our hope in that thing, whether it's wealth, whatever it may be, or is our ultimate trust in God? And ultimately, committing to living by God's principles, applying God's principles, firmly places our hope in God.